Hello, family, welcome to Timeless Tales. If this is your first time watching, please consider subscribing to reach out to more people who enjoy this type of stories, and if you are a returning subscriber, I really appreciate you. Your support means a lot to our community as we grow. Sit back as we dive into the full story. Abraham Andrew stood at the tall, gigantic iron gates of Andrew Enterprises, the company his father had built from the ground up. He adjusted the blue gatekeeper's uniform he wore, feeling out of place but determined. The billionaire's son had never done a day of manual labor in his entire life, but today, everything was different on his side. His father, Andrew, had given him a clear set of instructions. If you're going to lead this company one day in the future, he had said, you need to understand the struggles of the people who make it work up to the stage it is now in. Start at the gate, my son. Learn the truth now. It wasn't easy for Abraham to leave the comforts of his mansion and blend into the world of ordinary workers. He had to park his expensive car blocks away and take the bus to the company each day, carrying nothing that might hint at his real identity to people. With every step he took forward, he questioned if this was really necessary for someone like him. But deeply inside him, he knew his father's wisdom couldn't be ignored just like that. On his second day as the gatekeeper of the company, Abraham stood by the gate, watching as cars zoomed in and out of the company. Some of the employees greeted him with a curt nod, while others ignored him completely as if he didn't exist. He was trying to stay out of trouble when he heard sharp heels clicking against the pavement on the compound. "Hey! You," a voice called out loudly. He turned to see a tall, beautiful woman with piercing eyes and an air of authority. It was Emmeline, the company's manager. Abraham had heard about her reputation: strict, demanding, and often unkind. "Are you deaf?" she snapped, waving her hand in front of his face. "Get over here." Abraham quickly walked up to her, trying to keep his composure. "Yes, ma'am. How can I help?" "How can you help?" she repeated mockingly. "You can start by washing my car. It's filthy. And don't take all day, I have important meetings." Her tone stung, but Abraham nodded. "Right away, ma'am." As he worked on her car under the blazing sun, he couldn't help but wonder what kind of leader she was. If she treated a gatekeeper like this, how did she handle the other employees? Still, he said nothing, silently scrubbing the car and swallowing his pride. When he finished, he returned to his post, hoping for a quiet afternoon. But Emmeline wasn't done. She walked up to him again, pointing at a spot on the ground. "Do you see that?" she asked, her voice dripping with disdain. "There's a stain here. Lie down and clean it properly." Abraham hesitated for a moment, his jaw tightening. "Yes, ma'am," he said, keeping his voice steady. He crouched down, wiping the spot with a rag. Every part of him wanted to scream that he wasn't just a gatekeeper, that he was the son of the man who owned the entire company. But he reminded himself of his mission. As the days passed, Abraham found a small glimmer of kindness in the form of Phillip, the head of security. Phillip was an older man with a calm demeanor and a friendly smile. He noticed Abraham struggling with his duties one afternoon and stepped in. "Here, lad, let me help you with that," Phillip said, grabbing a bucket of water to wash another car. "Thank you," Abraham replied, surprised by the man's generosity. "You don't have to do this." Phillip shrugged. "We all have to look out for each other, don't we? This place can be rough sometimes." Abraham nodded, grateful for Phillip's help. Over time, the two began to talk during breaks. Phillip would share stories about his family and his years of service at the company. Abraham learned that Phillip had been with Andrew Enterprises since its early days and had seen it grow into the powerhouse it was today. "You remind me of someone," Phillip said one evening as they sat by the gate. "You have a calm way about you, like Mr. Andrew himself." Abraham froze for a moment but quickly recovered. "Do I? That's a big compliment." Phillip laughed. "Don't let it go to your head, son. Just keep working hard. As Abraham settled into his role, he began to notice things that didn't sit right with him. William, the head of human resources, often loitered near the gate, speaking in hushed tones to people who looked desperate. One afternoon, Abraham overheard part of a conversation. "You want the job? Then you know what to do," William said, slipping an envelope into his pocket. "And don't forget my special request." The woman he was speaking to looked uncomfortable but nodded before walking away from the gate. Abraham's stomach churned. It was clear that William was abusing his position, taking bribes and making inappropriate demands especially from ladies. Abraham jotted down the incident in a small notebook he had started carrying with him, determined to document everything he saw at the company. Then there was Isaac, the assistant manager. Isaac often strutted through the company like he owned the place, barking orders at employees and boasting about his future. "Mark my words," he told a group of employees near the gate one day. "When the old man announces the new CEO, it's going to be me. I've worked hard for this." Abraham stood nearby, pretending not to listen. He had seen Isaac's so-called hard work firsthand. Most of the time, Isaac was delegating his tasks to others or wasting company money on personal indulgences. And yet, in front of Mr. Andrew, Isaac played the part of a loyal and dedicated employee. One evening, as Abraham was closing up for the day, Phillip approached him with a troubled look. "Be careful, lad," Phillip said. "Not everyone here is what they seem. I've been hearing things, whispers about you." "About me?" Abraham asked, startled and confused. Phillip nodded. "People are wondering why you're so quiet, so observant. They think you might be in trouble." Abraham's heart sank down. He hadn't realized his actions were drawing the attention of the employees. "Thank you for warning me, Phillip. I'll be careful next time." The next morning, Abraham arrived to find a note taped to his locker. It read, "Stay in your place, gatekeeper, or you'll regret it." Abraham's hands trembled as he read the note. Someone had noticed his observations at everything in the company, and they didn't like it. But instead of scaring him, it only strengthened his resolve. He knew he had to dig deeper and find out who was behind the threatening note that he found taped to his locker. Later that week, Emmeline approached Abraham again, her tone even harsher than before. "You think you're special, don't you?" she sneered. "Just because Phillip likes you. You're nothing but a minor gatekeeper. Don't forget that. Keep it well in your head." Abraham looked her in the eye for the first time. "I know what I am," he said simply. "And I know what I'm here to do." Emmeline laughed. "Good luck with that," she said, walking away. As Abraham returned to his post, he couldn't help but smile to himself. Emmeline had no idea what was coming on the way. The quiet hum of early morning at Andrew Enterprises was interrupted by the sound of a luxury car pulling up to the gigantic gate. Abraham, standing at his post, immediately recognized it as his father's car. His heart raced seeing his father. He wasn't ready for this, not yet. But as the car came to a stop, he quickly adjusted his uniform and prepared to play his role very well. The car door opened, and Mr. Andrews stepped out, flanked by his lawyer. Abraham stiffened, nodding respectfully. "Welcome, sir," he said, bowing slightly. His father's eyes met his for a brief second before Andrew responded with a curt nod, careful not to give anything away. "Thank you," Andrew said, his voice cool. "Carry on with your work." Abraham returned to his position, watching as his father walked confidently into the building of the company. He couldn't help but feel a pang of frustration. His father's plan was wise, but it was difficult to stay silent while witnessing the cracks in the empire his family had built for many years. Inside the office, news of Mr. Andrews' arrival spread like wildfire. Employees who were usually glued to their phones or chatting in corners suddenly became industrious. Desks were cleared, files were shuffled, and fake smiles were plastered on faces. Emmeline, the ever-demanding manager, strutted to her office, calling out orders to everyone along the way. Make sure the floors are clean and spotless. And someone bring fresh coffee to the conference room now. Isaac, the assistant manager, was already in the lobby of the company, waiting to greet Mr. Andrew. He had even gone as far as wearing a new white suit, the expensive cologne he'd sprayed on himself filling the air with nice fragrance. "Ah, Mr. Andrew," he called out, his voice dripping with enthusiasm. "It's an honor to see you today, boss." Andrew shook his hand briefly, his expression unreadable. "Good to see you, Isaac. How are things here in the company?" "Oh, running smoothly," Isaac replied confidently. "The team is performing well under my guidance." Andrew raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Instead, he continued walking, his lawyer trailing behind him. Abraham, still at the gate, couldn't help but chuckle bitterly. He had seen Isaac's guidance firsthand, lazy, manipulative, and selfish. And Emmeline's sudden warmth? A far cry from the sharp tongue she wielded daily. Phillip joined Abraham at the gate, leaning casually against the wall. "They're putting on quite a show today," he remarked, his voice laced with sarcasm. Abraham smiled. "You noticed too?" Phillip laughed. "Son, I've been here long enough to know when people are pretending. They're all scrambling to impress Mr. Andrew. But you and I know the truth, don't we?" Abraham nodded, his expression turning serious. "We do. And I just hope my father sees it too." As the day went on, the atmosphere inside the company grew tense. Abraham could sense it even from the gate. Emmeline stormed out of the building at one point, barking orders into her phone. William, the head of human resources, slipped out of his office, glancing around nervously before disappearing down the hallway. Phillip noticed it too. "Something's up," he said, his eyes narrowing. "People are acting strange, even for them." Before Abraham could respond, a young woman approached the gate, looking anxious. She clutched a folder tightly in her hands. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly. I'm here to see Mr. William." Abraham exchanged a look with Phillip. "Do you have an appointment?" he asked. The woman nodded quickly. "Yes, but, he told me to come after hours. He said it would be easier to talk then." Phillip frowned. "After hours? That's odd." Abraham's mind raced. He had seen William meeting with women before, always in secret, and it never felt right. But he couldn't blow his cover, not yet. "Well, you'll have to wait here until he comes out," Abraham said, trying to sound casual. The woman nodded, her nervousness evident. As she sat down, Phillip leaned in close to Abraham. "Something's wrong," he whispered. "You should tell your father about this." "I will," Abraham replied, his jaw tightening. "But not yet." Later that evening, as most employees left for the day, Abraham spotted Isaac walking towards the gate. He looked irritated, muttering to himself. When he saw Abraham, he stopped abruptly. "You," Isaac snapped. "What are you still doing here?" "Just finishing my shift," Abraham replied evenly. Isaac sneered. "Don't think I haven't noticed you. Always watching, always listening. Who do you think you are?" Abraham kept his expression neutral. "Just doing my job, sir." Isaac took a step closer, his voice low and threatening. "Well, let me give you some advice. Stay in your lane. You're just a gatekeeper. Don't start thinking you're more than that." Abraham nodded, biting back a response. He watched as Isaac walked away, his arrogance on full display. But deep inside, Abraham's resolve hardened. Isaac's days of manipulation were numbered. The next morning, Mr. Andrew called for a meeting with all the department heads. The atmosphere in the conference room was tense. Emmeline sat at the head of the table, her usual confidence replaced with nervousness. Isaac was fidgeting, his eyes darting around the room. William looked pale, as though he hadn't slept. Andrew entered the room with his lawyer, his presence commanding attention. "Good morning," he said, his tone calm but firm. "I've been reviewing the company's operations, and I have some concerns." The room fell silent. No one dared to speak. "I've received reports of misconduct," Andrew continued, his gaze sweeping across the table. "Corruption, mistreatment of employees, and misuse of company resources. I want answers." Isaac was the first to speak. "Sir, I can assure you that any problems are minor and will be dealt with immediately." Andrew raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "Yes," Isaac said quickly. "We have a strong team, and I've been working closely with them to ensure everything runs smoothly." Abraham, standing just outside the room, couldn't help but smirk. Isaac's lies were unraveling, and it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. As the meeting continued, Andrew's lawyer stood up, holding a thick folder. "We've been conducting an internal investigation," he said, opening the folder. "And we've uncovered some disturbing evidence." He began reading aloud, detailing incidents of bribery, harassment, and financial mismanagement. William's face turned white. Emmeline looked away, avoiding eye contact. Isaac shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Andrew let the silence linger before speaking. "This company was built on honesty and hard work. I will not tolerate anything less." The tension in the room was palpable. Abraham, listening from outside, felt a surge of pride. His father's words were a reminder of why he had taken on this mission in the first place. The long-awaited day finally arrived. Employees whispered among themselves as they shuffled into the conference room, their faces a mix of curiosity and anticipation. Everyone knew that today was the day Mr. Andrew would announce the new CEO. Some were confident, some nervous, but no one was more confident than Isaac. Isaac strutted into the room, his freshly pressed suit and polished shoes gleaming under the fluorescent lights. He grinned at anyone who glanced his way, nodding like a king greeting his subjects. "Today's the day," he said to Emmeline, who sat near the front of the room. Emmeline gave him a tight smile. "Well, good luck," she replied, though her tone was tinged with irritation. She wanted the spotlight too, but deep down, she knew Isaac had positioned himself as the obvious choice. At the back of the room, Abraham watched the scene unfold, his heart pounding in his chest. He wore a simple shirt and jeans, nothing that would draw attention. His father had insisted he remain hidden until the announcement. "They need to show their true colors before you step in," Andrew had told him the night before. Phillip, the kind-hearted security head, approached Abraham quietly. "You ready for this, son?" he asked, his voice low. "As ready as I'll ever be," Abraham replied, giving him a small, nervous smile. "It's going to be interesting." Phillip chuckled. "Interesting is one way to put it. Just remember, you've got this. I've seen the way you handle yourself. You're going to be a great leader." Abraham nodded, feeling a flicker of confidence. He had spent weeks documenting the corruption, manipulation, and mistreatment in the company. Today, it was all going to come to light. Mr. Andrew entered the room with his lawyer, his face calm but serious. The chatter died down immediately as everyone stood to greet him. Andrew gestured for them to sit, taking his place at the head of the table. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his deep voice commanding the room. "As you all know, today is a significant day for Andrew Enterprises. This company has grown into one of the largest in the country, and it's time to choose a new leader who will carry it forward." Isaac leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms with a smug grin. He glanced around the room, as if daring anyone to challenge him. Andrew continued, his gaze sweeping across the employees. "I've spent the past few weeks observing the operations here, speaking with people, and reviewing reports. And I must say, I've uncovered some troubling issues." The room tensed. Emmeline shifted uncomfortably in her seat. William's forehead glistened with sweat. Isaac's grin faltered, but only for a moment. Andrew paused, letting the silence linger. Then, he spoke again. Before I announce the new CEO, I want to introduce someone who has played a crucial role in uncovering the truth about this company. He nodded toward the back of the room. Abraham, would you come forward? Gasps filled the room as Abraham stood and began walking to the front. Whispers erupted among the employees. Who's that? Someone murmured. Wait, isn't he the gatekeeper? Another whispered. Isaac's face turned a deep shade of red. What's he doing here? He muttered under his breath, shooting a glare at Emmeline, who looked equally shocked. Abraham reached the front and stood beside his father. Andrew placed a hand on his shoulder, smiling proudly. This is my son, Abraham Andrew, he announced. He has spent the past few weeks working here undercover to observe how this company operates from the ground level. The room erupted into chaos. Employees whispered furiously, and Isaac looked like he might explode. Emmeline's mouth hung open, her usual composure completely shattered. Silence. Andrew commanded, his voice booming. The room fell quiet again. Abraham has provided me with detailed reports of what he witnessed during his time here. And let me tell you, the results are deeply disappointing. He turned to Abraham. Son, would you like to share what you've learned? Abraham stepped forward, meeting the eyes of the employees one by one. First, I want to thank Phillip, he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. He showed me kindness and supported me when no one else did. People like him are the heart of this company. Phillip nodded, his face lighting up with pride. Abraham's tone hardened as he continued. But I've also seen the worst side of this place. William, the head of human resources, has been taking bribes and demanding favors from women in exchange for jobs. William shot to his feet. That's a lie, he shouted, but Andrew raised a hand, silencing him. We have evidence, Andrew said calmly. Sit down. William sank back into his chair, his face pale. Abraham turned to Isaac next. And Isaac, the assistant manager who claims to be a leader. I've seen you shirk your responsibilities, waste company funds, and treat employees like dirt. You fired me for resting during a break, not because I wasn't doing my job, but because you wanted to prove your power. Isaac stood, his fists clenched. This is ridiculous. You're just some spoiled rich kid who doesn't understand how things work. Abraham didn't flinch. I understand perfectly, he replied. And your behavior proves you're not fit to lead. Finally, Abraham addressed Emmeline. And you, the manager who mistreats her employees and demands respect without earning it. You humiliated me time and time again, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. Emmeline's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know who you were, she said, her voice trembling. If I had known. It doesn't matter who I am, Abraham interrupted. Everyone deserves respect, regardless of their position. Andrew stepped forward, his voice firm. The new CEO of Andrew Enterprises is someone who has shown integrity, resilience, and a commitment to fairness. That person is Abraham Andrew. The room fell silent. Even Isaac, who had been fuming moments before, seemed too stunned to speak. Abraham looked out at the employees, his heart pounding. I know this will be a big change, he said, addressing the room. But change is what this company needs. Starting today, we're going to rebuild this place on a foundation of honesty, respect, and teamwork. The following day, Abraham called for another meeting. This time, he didn't hesitate to take action. William was fired immediately, escorted out by security. Isaac begged for a second chance, but Abraham stood firm. I've seen enough, he said coldly. You're done here. Emmeline, tears streaming down her face, pleaded for forgiveness. I can change, she said, her voice breaking. Please, give me another chance. Abraham hesitated, but then he shook his head. I'm sorry, but I can't ignore what you've done. You need to leave. Finally, Abraham turned to Phillip. "You've been a shining example of what this company should be," he said. "I'm promoting you to manager. Lead with the same kindness and integrity you've shown me." Philip's eyes widened in disbelief. "Thank you, sir," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I won't let you down." Under Abraham's leadership, Andrew Enterprises transformed. The toxic culture was replaced with one of respect and collaboration. Employees felt valued, and the company thrived. Months later, as Abraham sat in his office overlooking the city, his father walked in. "You've done well, son," Andrew said, pride shining in his eyes. Abraham smiled. "I learned from the best." Together, they watched as the company they had both fought to protect grew stronger each day, a symbol of what could be achieved through honesty, courage, and determination. Moral lesson from the story. Leadership isn't about power or position, it's about integrity, kindness, and the courage to make tough decisions for the greater good. Those who lead with fairness and respect will always leave a lasting legacy. Thanks for watching. Till next time.